Welcome back to Velshi and Rhule. Former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci has just penned a new op-ed in the Washington Post. It's titled, "I Was Wrong About Trump. Here's Why." In it, Scaramucci details his break with the president and explains his previous support.
He concludes with a call to action for both sides of the political aisle, writing this: "I challenge my fellow Republicans to summon the nerve to speak out on the record against Trump. Defy the culture of fear he has created and go public with the concerns you readily express in private. And to members of the so-called resistance, please leave room on the off-ramp for those willing to admit their mistakes." Joining us now, former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. He is the author of Trump, the Blue-Collar President. Tell us, what do they tell you?
Thankfully, I'm the only person that bought the book, so they're in the incinerator right now, but that's fine. Okay, so go ahead. What do you want to
tell us, though? You said all the things that you say in private. What do fellow Republicans or members of this White House say in private?
I think that they're sharing the same thing that I'm sharing in public, that he's manifestly unhinged. He's a ridiculous bully. He has no managerial style or structure. He doesn't listen or take counsel from anybody.
What's new about that?
Well, like I said in the article, there's nothing new about it, but in my opinion, it's getting worse. And somebody once said to me, "What's the red line?" I used the Potter Stewart line. You know, it's like pornography. You know it when you see it. The red line for me, as I articulated in the article, was the comments about the 4 congresswomen, who, by the way, I'm a Republican. I don't agree with any of the 4 congresswomen, but I agree with their right to have standing to stay in the country and be citizens. Ali and I talked about that, and being a person of courage to speak out against that sort of racist nonsense. I think it's just totally ridiculous.
So I guess that's a question a lot of people have, though, right? Why, you're a smart guy and everybody knows that. Why did it take you so long to come around to that?
I'm a smart guy. I don't know. I thought I was a dope this morning on the presidential Twitter.
According to him.
Yeah,
this got personal real fast, right?
He's coming after a private citizen on his Twitter feed, but that's also projecting on his part.
But hold on, he's coming after a private citizen.
That's a form of fascism, which we all know.
Are you concerned for your safety that the President of the United States is going
I'm not concerned for my safety because I'm a big boy. I know how to handle myself. I'm not concerned for my safety, but I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to stoke that division and that hatred and create a rising of a specter of anger. And he's also, I don't even take it personally, he's doing that because he knows the people around him absolutely inimically hate his guts, but they're afraid to speak out. You're a very good journalist. You've heard them say it to you privately. I would caution journalists now to say, hey, you're saying it to me privately. Why don't you save the country and be more open about it and say it in public? What are you afraid of? That President Trump is going to bully you into submission on his Twitter feed and call you some names?
What are Republicans afraid of? Never mind
They're
staffers.
Afraid of three or four different things. Number one, he is a maniacal bully filled with anger and rage. And obviously, just look at the feed. He's like completely unhinged. They're afraid they could get primaried because he right now has a personality called stranglehold. It's like a McCarthy fever that's going on in the party. And then the third thing I think that they're afraid of is that they have great uncertainty about the 2020 election. And so in their consensus about a month ago, he's winning, he's the president, the economy's booming. And now they're like, okay, you know, he's crazy, but he's winning and the economy's booming. Now they're like, he's crazy and the economy is having a rate of change. You know, you guys know I'm running $10 billion and I study the economy very carefully. I'm not saying it's going into recession by the end of 2020, but it's going to slow down. You can totally feel it because of all the unpredictability about the trade.
But you've been arguing all along, let Trump be Trump, put his rhetoric aside. I mean, your book was The Blue-Collar President. You said to us right here on this set, he speaks to blue-collar America, he speaks to the rust belt, he's bringing jobs back. Hold on a second.
Promise.
But then we look at companies like U.S. Steel. They're having layoffs this week. We know that their second quarter earnings that we just heard were a third of what they were last year.
Right.
What did we, or I'm going to say it, you miss? You argued that he had the right economic plan for those exact voters.
But that's more, in my opinion, again, it's more related to what's going on about the lack of predictability in trade. And so the tariffs are disrupting everybody's supply chain, including domestic manufacturing. Okay, you could read about that, or I can send you stuff about that to explain the doctrine of unintended consequences of manipulating the tariff system the way he has and making it so unpredictable. As an example, he could have said there's a differential. We're going to go 2% a quarter for 10 quarters. We're going to get up to 20%. But every business leader, large and small businesses in America, you have 2.5 years to get yourselves there. But he didn't do that because he's a narcissist. He's got to do everything himself. He threw a ball in a roulette wheel Trump tariff roulette. Nobody knows what's going on, and so now U.S. Steel has to lay off a couple hundred people.
But Anthony, he's not alone.
But you
did Peter
you
Navarro,
wanted me to
Larry
address the other
Kudlow?
thing, or
Oh,
no?
sure.
Because I just quickly, you're asking about the book. If you read the book, it's about what the president's promise was, and if you read the book, it was about what the vacuum of advocacy was for blue-collar people. And what I said to Bill Maher one night on his show, if you're going to try to beat President Trump, you have to go to those people. Stop calling them deplorable, white nationalists, all this nonsense. Go meet with them in the areas that they live in and give them hope and good policies
but
to raise their living standards.
there were a lot
That's
of people.
the message.
There were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who might have easily voted for Bernie Sanders because they both identified that.
And I write that in the
problem.
book. I went to several Bernie Sanders rallies, and I saw sort of the same anxiety, just two different policy prescriptions.
Right. So the identification of that anxiety,
that can beat Trump can meld those two things.
It's valid,
frankly.
but if you don't actually have a plan, there's nothing that Donald Trump has done since the beginning, including the time you were at the White House, that has actually addressed that effectively. He identified it, and he got a lot of votes for identifying it. He tapped into a vein of anger and anxiety and frustration, much of which is valid. But he hadn't done anything about that, and there's no sense that he's going to at this point.
Well, again, I'm not Trump deranged. I'm like Trump fatigued. I mean, this nonsense is crazy. It's hurting our global standing. It's hurting our domestic zeitgeist. I mean, it's crazy. But I'm not Trump deranged. There's certain things that he did by lowering the taxes that made the businesses more competitive. I mean, we had the highest tax code in the industrial America. There are certain things he did at the
but we didn't see those companies reinvest.
Most of them did share buybacks.
But it made it more competitive. And so there was an opportunity. If he didn't dial up the tariffs and create all that uncertainty, there was an opportunity to get more capital investment. The capital investment numbers in the first and second quarter were a disaster. They're going to be really bad in the third quarter, primarily because of the lack of predictability. You know, he was going to throw tariffs on Mexico, then he pulled it back. He's this tariff, that tariff. It's going to be September 1st. Now it's December 15th. That's slowing down capital investment. So the cohesion of the plan and the long-term policy thinking behind the plan is non-existent because he doesn't listen to anybody.
So if you know the
So
policies
it's got to be
that
about
will work,
himself.
and if you know the politics that worked, are you the person to primary the president?
Well, I'm a private citizen, and so I have no
He was
interest.
a private citizen
I
before he
understand
was
that, but I
running.
have no political experience. So
Neither did
to
he.
me, I understand that. I understand that. Am I the person? No, I don't think I am the person. Let's see. We're organizing right now. We've got a lot of traction. It's before Labor Day. We'll make an announcement sometime, early.
What does that mean you're organizing?
Early October.
What are you doing?
There's a very large group of Republicans, some of which, frankly, have left the party. But there's people that have, ex-cabinet officials, military people. There's a whole large
What are their
cadre of
names?
people. So I think because of presidential bullying, I think it would be much easier to get them to come out in a group. I think it's very hard to take incoming from the president for most people. Me, I'm a New Yorker. I could personally care. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, keep firing it in. It's like ridiculous. But for most people, they get a little unnerved by that. And so let's do it in a group. There's safety in numbers, and I think people will then be able to express themselves very openly and very eloquently and dispassionately about what is really going on.
So are they going to?
Why he's
you guys
a
all going to field a
systemic
candidate?
danger.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry?
Are they going to field a candidate?
Yeah, well, that's the goal. The goal is to field somebody that's experienced. I'm calling on 2024 candidates to think about the future because you can't whistle past the graveyard of President Trump's incompetence and his style. You can't whistle past that. So you can't stand there on the platform in 2024 and say, oh, I knew he was crazy, but I was afraid of a presidential tweet, so I didn't speak my mind. You see what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that one or two of them will be Ronald Reagan, will step in like he did in '76 and primary this guy so we can right-size and re-engineer the party. But unfortunately, the party's become a little bit of a personality cult, and he's trying to silence everybody in the party, which is also a big danger.
Is it Mark Sanford?
Bill Weld,
Again, the one I know personally is Governor Weld, and I have a good relationship with him. I don't know Mark Sanford, so I don't want to comment on him other than the fact that he's. Do you want to run as my vice president?
No.
I'll tell you what. If you
But I'd
run
like
as
to know
my,
if you're going to primary
if
the
you
president.
run as my vice president,
No.
you and I will. I'll take a shot.
Negative.
Okay, we'll make you the director.
We just got these mugs made. We can't.
I'll make
Velshi. You can't leave.
Velshi the director of communications.
I'm going to have to take off.
You're going to have a 12-day limit, meaning, floor. Okay, so you'll be able to be the communication.
As long
for
as I
12
last
days.
more than 11 days, like a bull ride.
Then I'm going to review you every day after that. But
All
you
right,
could be our
quickly,
communications
though,
director.
it's not just the president going after you. The GOP chairwoman, Ronna Romney McDaniel, also going after you.
Yeah.
You're not just a Trump supporter. You're a big supporter of Mitt Romney, of Jeb Bush. You have been a
Walker,
Team
the
100 Republican for years.
Republican Governors Association. I've written a lot of different checks. I mean,
so what's up with you?
I sort of think that that's a little unfair. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on her, obviously, because she's got the bully in chief. Doing all these crazy things. The poor woman had to drop her maiden name, Romney, from her name. It's
legally,
tremendous.
she had to?
I don't know. Look at her Twitter feed.
She chose to.
Just tremendous pressure on her. I feel bad for her, actually, and so I'm not out here criticizing her. I'm just asking her the open, intellectual question about whether or not that's the right thing to do for the party. 2024 is going to be right around the corner. He continues on this trajectory of full-blown crazy, he'll crash and burn. There's no way reasonable men and women of standing and statesmen in our party or in the country are going to be able to tolerate this much longer. So I'm just calling on her, take a step back. President Bush had a 91% approval rating. Pat Buchanan primaried him, and the world changed in 1993. So what you see right now, and you're assuming will be the status quo in 15 months, may not be the status quo in 15 months. So open the tent a little bit, relax on your Twitter feed that happens to be @GOP, and embrace the other intellectual ideas in the party, because the future is going to be without Donald Trump one way or another. It's either 2020 or 2024.
Anthony, good to see you. Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House communications director.
Planned